Welcome, Mortal Coils. Today, I am moderating. This is Steve. For those of us who are just now joining our little caravan of, I don't think we have many followers yet, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
That being said, we're joined by Trevor and Bray. They will make introductions here soon. Today, we're going to talk about a question: what do we owe each other? And just to let you know on the kind of direction that we're trying to go, we're trying to talk about what social contracts exist out there, which ones maybe we could even talk about which one should we keep, which one should we get rid of, this, that, and the other. It's very cultural today, very cultural. First and immediately, I'd like to thank one of our avid listeners. One of my students got me a microphone, and I cannot believe it. Cannot believe it. Wept at least one tear over it. You know what I mean? It's just an unbelievable gift, and I thank her for it. No names. She's a student, but you know who you are. All right. So
Beautiful.
that being said, let's start off. Introduce yourself, Bray. Give us what you'd like to talk about tonight on that question. What do we owe each other?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Hello, followers of the Four Mortal Coils bandwagon. Hopefully, we'll all reach some sort of destination before we all rot of.
We'll die in dysentery. We'll die of dysentery first. Yep.
Perhaps our Oregon Trail will lead us somewhere useful. If not, we'll have great fun along the way. But yeah, so today, what do we owe each other? My first thoughts on the question are entirely political. I'll be honest, I thought about this on my shower about an hour ago, trying to figure out what exactly I was going to bring to the conversation. And my mind went to politics first, and sort of maybe more of the social contracts that are trying to be pushed through legislation, one could say, on the opposing sides of the United States political landscape. However, that is a tired horse, and I'm actually really excited tonight to talk about a little bit more, maybe more of a literal what do we owe each other, and bring up tipping culture, and discuss sort of thoughts around tipping, and sort of appears to be everywhere nowadays. Is it justified? Should we tip? Like, should there be mandatory tipping in certain instances? Who knows? Maybe we'll find out. So
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a good hopping off point, I believe. It'll lead somewhere is my point. What about you, Trevor?
Yeah.
First thoughts.
First thoughts. Well, first off, thank you anyone who decided to click on this episode this fine day. I might be a little hazy, a little slow on this particular episode, I'm afraid. I just finished climbing a mountain.
And yeah, you just got off the Magnum PI set.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm pretty mighty tired. I was in Yosemite for a 5-day backpacking trip, and I just literally hosed myself off of all the dirt, and I have the biggest boil on my foot, and I put on this Hawaiian and I sat here. TMI, but that's the current state of affairs. And I might be a little hazy this episode, but I will try my very best. And I owe it to you, audience.
We'll need to quote Trevor on that. I threw on this Hawaiian,
That's right. I was like, oh, my hair's a little wet. I better throw on this thing, and and I owe it to both the audience as well as you two as friends to do my very best here, and I shall. So now let me encounter the actual question at hand. What do we owe each other? So when I think of what do we owe each other, I think, well, it sounds to me like we're speaking of narratives, stories. There are many stories out there. There are many narratives that you live with. And I think as you engage with and encounter life as a narrative, as you surf these narratives, you sort of build this hierarchy in your mind of what other people fit into within that narrative. And that's true for what is required of you by the state, what is required of you by all of the other ethical acting human beings in the environment, what is desired of you in many other such things. I'm afraid I'd like to dig in a little bit of the previous episode for anyone who hadn't seen it, episode 20, where we talk about protesting and that sort of thing. And for a lot of people who are protesting something like the environment, let's say, or let's say the Israeli-Palestine conflict, which we talked about a fair bit last episode, those narratives, I find very often, a protester of any sort will find that it is incumbent upon those people around them to also be protesters, almost as if that you yourself owe it. It feels as if it's an overarching narrative uh, that feels a need, or at least the people who innovate that narrative feel a need to grab a hold of and grapple other people and swing ahead on them into it. The same is true for, let's say, like religions and all sorts of things. There's a certain need to grapple a hold of others and pull them in. Uh, and yeah, it's I encounter that question in terms of a narrative, and I can't escape from it outside of just it being one of many different narratives. I can't find an exact piecemeal. Well, what exactly do you owe uh, in this particular environment without saying first that it's part of an overall arcing narrative that we here are deliberating on right now. Now, I'm not saying this to say that that's that's going to be controversial. I think that's more or less the way that most people feel about it. Well, it depends on what you're asking, essentially. But I do want to lay that out flat, and then we can start to talk about things like, well, now that we're here, now that we know how this whole thing is kind of strange, and we're just sort of asking questions. Well, we live in a society, don't we? We live in this country, and we have to figure out, well, do you like this country? If yes, then therefore, what can we do to better achieve the goals of that country? Well, basically, let's fit ourselves within this narrative right now. Do you enjoy this narrative? Do you like this narrative? What do we owe each other in order to get this narrative to pull forwards? How do we prevent the decline and fall of this particular narrative before the next one comes? So that's, I think, essentially what this dialogue. When you ask me that question, what do we owe each other? What do we owe each other? That's what I think, and that's usually where my mind goes.
Sure, sure. So, my first thoughts are actually more general. I'm the one who posed the question, uh, "What do we owe each other?" And it's very neat that we're going in three different directions, because I think that uh, before the end of this talk, we will put those together. We will figure out like where these ideas kind of meet, so to speak. And I'm certain that you both agree. My first thoughts, though, were, of course, the science. Of course, the um, how could we quantify the an answer to that question? What do we owe each other? And of course, I immediately start thinking about what did human culture look like before our current society, and what I mean by that is actually what did it look like uh, even before we had um, these really big like mega societies, like these very eusocial societies. How did people, how did ancient man get by? What did they owe each other, so to speak? Because in terms of evolution, we have not moved at all, or if we have, it's very small, a very small uptick or whatever. Um, the point is that we're still the same species. We're still beholden to the same problems. We're still beholden to the same advantages and everything that comes along with it. So, uh, I have, in general, kind of like three levels I'd like to talk about, and I don't think they come in a specific order, right? So I wanna circle back a little bit to what I'm sure Bray wants to talk about. I'll name the three to begin with. And on the paper in front of me, I have what do we owe each other, and the three things are respect question mark, support question mark, and love, question mark. All right. So, what do we think? What do we think, Bray? I would like to start off with support. I know that you're going to
Support.
have pretty strong opinions about this.
Okay, yeah. So, if you mean support in the sense of like, support that doesn't come in the form of respect or love, then, because those could obviously be seen as signs of support. I'm thinking like material support.
Yeah, material support.
So, do we owe each other material support? I, being someone who would consider themselves a progressive, I would say yes, absolutely. There's a quote that's probably been mentioned on the podcast before that I think we should get in early here, and then it has to do with humanism. It's I've heard it from Matt Dillahunty. Got him in.
Of course.
But it's the old we live in a physical universe, dictated by physical laws, and if we're going to survive on this planet where we are forced to cooperate and share space and resources, then it makes sense that we would work together instead of in opposition to one another. Therefore, in as much as our evolution has dictated to us as well, we are a social species. We benefit from working together.
So real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, sure.
What do you say to the people? And Trevor, hop in if you'd like. What do you say to the people who we know very well? We've seen these people a lot, especially I feel in these recent days. These like lizard brain people who like really believe that they can do it alone, right?
Oh, okay.
Right.
I'm trying to think. Okay, for example, a very Jim Bro science thing I could hear.
Oh, I may have lost Steven for a second. There he's back. He's back.
He's back.
Okay.
He's back.
I'm having connection issues.
No, you're fine. You had just said what do the people who think they can do it alone.
Yeah, you said lizard brain people, and then
these lizard brain people who think they can do it alone. So what do we say to these Jim Bro science, Facebook science people?
Yes,
who believe that we should be competing for resources.
Let's hear from Trevor first.
Oh yeah, no, I could talk about that. So I've been that person before. I've been that person before.
I'd like to make it clear. We all know this kind of person. They believe we should. It's not that we have to. They think that we should be competing for resources.
So when just before I talk about it, just so I understand what exactly I ought to be talking about here, these lizard people that we're talking about we're saying that they're completely individualistic. They want no support whatsoever. They want it's just like the supremacy of one over others, and that's essentially their way of being. Like, I want no help from no one. No one help me. Full libertarian all the way.
They want human survival on the free market.
Yeah, exactly. That. It sounds to me that's what we're speaking.
I love how you said that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of saying that. Okay. So that person is. I can really empathize with that state of reality. I really can.
Me too.
I have been in that state of affairs before, where I just don't trust anyone anymore. I just don't feel trust. I just don't. I think that's a state of affairs that is resultant from particular actions within someone's life. That's kind of a blanket statement. Honestly, you could say that about anything. But I think that state of affairs where you must keep things separated, like this is, it's like that song from the Simon and Garfunkel. I am a rock, I am an island. How does it go? I'll never once let you see how my broken heart is hurting me. You'll never know that I still love you. I love it when
Trevor's
though my
got a song
remains. No, that's a different song. Fuck. That's completely. That's like the Righteous Brothers or something. I'm really tired. Anyway, the point of that song. I am a rock, I am an island, um, is I put up these 4 strong walls, and inside no one can hurt me. I can really sympathize with that sentiment, where you're hemorrhaging feeling, and you really want, and you reach out for someone or anyone, and you just fail, and it fails. One of the solutions to that problem of that total isolation is, well, I'm just going to be isolated. As simple as that. I can't trust people. I can't trust you. And there are many different ways that reality can, where that is resultant from reality. Whether that be, should I even list examples? It's myriad. There's many
Well,
different
I have a
things that
quick
could lead to that
question,
point.
if you like.
Please.
So, where do you suppose that comes from? And I want to be clear, right?
Hmm.
So, is the real question here is this a modern problem? Um, is it a modern problem that we isolate from each
No,
other?
no,
Yes.
no.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, so I'm with Trevor. I really don't think it's a modern problem at all.
Hmm.
Uh,
I think I
is
think
it
it's an
is it
American. It's
is it
yes.
like uh, ratcheted up in the modern day? I think so. I think so.
Can be. Well, we're so globalized now compared
Well,
to ever
I
before.
guess it
But
depends on how much you focus the lens on it. Because have people been isolationist in the past? Well, absolutely. But I would say, without even seeing any data, that intuitively, I believe that there is, you know, probably an uptick in isolationist personality, at least in the United States, as of the last
50 years.
30 to 40, yeah, it might as well say 50 years.
I think that well, now we're working with such powerful generalizations here, but I think that is a result of just the series of global conflicts that we find ourselves in. Whether like the United States getting involved with like the Gulf War, just the invasion of Iraq, and this whole situation happening in like today, it's like a Ukraine Russia situation. Now, I'm
That's
not trying to
part of
say you
it.
should feel this or that about it, but I would say that there is sort of a reverberation there, where for as long as a particular series of voices or a subset of the American populace is unanswered, the more it starts to quake and tumble and gather people that are more on the fringe or more on the knife's edge over to their side as they are not attended to. This is why midterm elections always seem to go completely against what happened during like the main elections. Like you see like a Democrat president like Biden, then right after that, like the Republicans will swing in because generally speaking, it's a reverberation there, like people moving around. And I think for the many decades that go by, where you do like real politique or just in that sort of global situation with the United States, you find yourself with many different isolationists because no one ever listens to them, or at least they don't feel that they are, and that creates this growing sentiment. So that's a very general sweep of how you could engage with that with this current state of affairs. But unfortunately, working on an individual basis, it's I'm afraid it's more complicated than that.
So, um, like I say though, uh, I don't want to call it psychopathic, right? But it certainly is in that realm. Um,
Hmm.
I feel I feel as though our modern existence really like I said cranks up the tension on these isolationist behaviors. I'm not sure why, but we have a lot of people who, like I said, just believe they can do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
one thing I try to convince people almost every day, uh, without being political, by the way, that it's like how do you suppose that there's um how shall we say no social net around you, right? In other
Mm-hmm.
words, why do you think that you can just do it all, especially nowadays? Um, whenever people are getting more and more specialized in their fields,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how is it possible to do it alone? Ray, comments?
I absolutely do have some comments. I totally understand this perspective because there's a large part of me that feels this way. I feel like a mixture of two sort of inside me. There are two wolves. One is a incredibly isolationist,
Uh-huh.
uh, off-grid survival, leave society. The other is I don't ever want to be 5 miles outside the city limits and bathe in my social programs. Anyways, I empathize, like you guys said, with this sort of mindset because it's liberating. It's taking responsibility for yourself into your own hands. Um,
But but
there's
but at the same time, Bray, I really think it comes from people wanting to get away from other people. In other words,
You're not wrong.
abandon responsibility.
You're well abandoned what responsibility? I think that's what we're here to talk about, is it
Exactly.
not? Because
Exactly.
you absolutely have a responsibility to yourself. And some people can abandon what we may consider a responsibility to their peers. Um, and there's an entire, I would say, very bluntly, an entire political party dedicated to that entire attitude in the United States, and it's called conservatism. It's called the Republican Party, because at every turn you'll find that the Republican Party is opposed to things like social programs where we all pool our money to help everybody, or they are opposed to any sort of programs that would benefit a minority, because they would consider that unfair. However you view that. Conservatism tends to be incredibly individualistic. I would define it as a "fuck you, I got mine, good luck everybody else" kind of mindset.
Certainly feels
Um,
that way
it
sometimes.
certainly feels that way.
Yes.
Whereas on the other hand, you have, however you feel about it, the Democrat Party, who are just that. On the other hand, support for minorities or underrepresented peoples, and are for social programs that would benefit everyone,
Hmm.
at the expense of, technically, financially speaking, very few. More on that in a completely different conversation, but you get my overall gist. Um, like I said, I empathize with that mindset because I too have bouts of, I would love to live on my own land off in the middle of wherever and create some home for my family in the future that's completely independent of needing like a government or something to provide, like a state to provide for me. Um, and I don't think that that's inherently a bad thing to like want for, to like want to be separate to a certain degree. But I don't think that you should say, well, everybody's got to be that way. Or by extension, what I mean by that is I don't want to participate in a social program because, that I can take care of myself. So I don't need to bear the responsibility of helping take care of my peers. It's like, if I can do me, then leave me out of everybody else's affairs.
Okay.
Um,
So, but I mean that has to beg the question, right?
Mm.
When we're talking about support, we're talking about not just financial support. I wanna try and move away from that a little bit. Kind of like the conversation we had the other day about how flimsy money is, and maybe we owe each other, services, for example,
hmm,
guaranteed services and so on. Um, uh, you know, if anyone watched that episode, it's not like I have all my eggs in that basket, but I do want to understand, Bray, like, why, and this is me asking you this question, expecting you to reply to me like I know nothing, right? I
sure.
want you to explain to me and the listener, um, what exactly do I owe my neighbors, right? Um, do I owe them defense? Do I owe them, uh, there are any number of things we could put in here. I mean, what do I owe them?
That's a good question, Stephen, who was born yesterday, and listener. I will attempt to answer as best as I can. I think this question can go a lot of ways.
For sure.
There's definitely some ideals that we could create and pretend like some small percentage even of people are going to live by those, but people vary so much from house to house. It's really, impossible to pin anything down. And you do mean like, you mean like neighbor as in like literally my physical neighbors? You just mean like people as a society?
Well, I mean, why not both, right?
Sure, sure.
In other words, the great majority of people you encounter every day, I would consider those your
Yeah.
neighbors.
It's even like the people of your state, like the people like your countrymen, friends, Romans, and countrymen.
Yeah.
We could consider. What do we owe them? Do we owe them security? Do we owe them? I think there's an underlying layer within everyone, or at least most people who live, let's say, within good means. Like for me, I live in a suburb, more or less, in a really nice neighborhood, surrounded by other people who are well off. Um, and if my neighbor came over and was like, "Hey, can I borrow a carton of milk?" Like, that would be nothing for me to give them a material resource. It's like I don't even really have a relationship with the people who live, really anybody in my neighborhood, honestly, other than like maybe a couple of people. But if anybody came up to me, I would likely be happy to provide some sort of material resource, or you know uh, I've given rides to people, even in very sketchy situations, to different parts of town that I had no idea who they were. Or I think a lot of it can come down to a sort of virtue ethics situation there, and kind of values that we put on a plaque or on a pedestal, and say that these are good things and this is how we should treat each other. Um, there's something to be said about that. Or to even talk about the Fallout TV show that we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier. The Golden Rule seems to be a recurring theme as part of Lucy's transition into the wasteland from the very sheltered vault upbringing, and sort of how will she hang on to that, or will she abandon it, based on what she experiences. And I think we generally operate a lot of the same ways in our life. We're brought up and we're taught certain things, and then you go out in the world and your values may change and your principles may change. Um, but living in a society, I think you sort of, most people have an expectation of, we should help each other, we should help our neighbors. I think what you owe them really comes down to your personal preference at the end of the day. Maybe there's no concrete way to put it. If somebody's invading your neighbor's home and you see it going down, do you step in? I mean, might as well be a new trolley problem, like, it's not my property, but this is my fellow man. If I
Yeah.
interfere, I could be complicit in some form or format. It's there's a lot of variables.
So
Can
I want to hear from Trevor for
Mhm.
certain. Like I want to pose that same question.
Mhm.
What do you owe your neighbors? What do I owe my neighbors?
Mhm. Okay. So when I hear this question, what do I owe my neighbors? So I can't help but encounter it like this. So Bray had mentioned something about the Conservative Party and the Republicans and that sort of thing within the United States, and the effects that it has in relationship to like the Democrats and that sort of thing. So when we ask these questions of what do we owe our neighbors, I want to diversify the ways of the ways of encountering this. I want to show that there is no one blanket way of encountering this in any one particular way at all. Why do I say this? I think a couple of what am I essentially trying to say here is there takes many different types of individuals to make up an assembly or a society. I think you necessarily require a certain amount of people that are highly individualistic. They do something that is necessarily important to the functioning of that society. I see no unilateral what oughtedness for humans in a space. Like for example, we talk about conservatism, and Bray had spoken somewhat of the negatives that it offers to the state today in terms of like social welfare systems and that sort of thing. And just like that, if we wanted to, we can innovate Sparta. if anyone know, I don't know if I've brought this up in an episode before, but Sparta was an incredibly um, structured society, very, very conservative. Its culture was what
Traditionalist.
traditionalist, yes, but a better word would be calcified. It was incapable
Yeah.
of change,
Mhm.
completely and utterly calcified. It was essentially a warrior culture. I'm sure many people, listeners, would know, but it goes further than just saying it was a warrior culture. It was a war on the land itself. That's what Sparta was. The Lacedaemonians were a war upon the land itself. They culturally saw themselves as an invading party that came into the land of Sparta, and the Helots, the initial inhabitants of it, became their slaves. And every year they would reiterate a declaration of war against the native peoples, the Helots, and they'd treat them quite terribly. Why did I bring all that up? I mean to say that Sparta eventually, by the time of like Alexander the Great, for example, by that time Sparta had dwindled to a point of complete insignificance. Like Alexander didn't even need to do anything involving Sparta. He just went in and he just destroyed Thebes. That's really his full contribution before he ran over to Persia and did his thing. So conservatism, the reason why I bring that up is to show that conservatism has its faults. It's extremely dangerous to be completely calcified and incapable of change. There is no one state of affairs that's unilaterally useful from the ancient era all the way up to the modern one. There's no one way of governance that would allow you to have it perfect. That's why there is no such thing as a perfect book, such as like the recitation, the Quran. There's no one size fits all. You're not going to be able to solve the human equation. You'll be able to align up a certain configurement that's useful for particular scenarios, but you won't necessarily find something that's always going to be principle. And the same thing can be said for liberals. The changing of political norms. For example, the French Revolution, Robespierre, that sort of thing, where they completely reset like the calendar, and it was just absolutely just insanity and just like laws all the time, and it was just complete bouncing around of what the overall normality of the state was. It was a form of chaos, really. And the same thing. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that if you have too much of either thing, either sentiment, it can lead to bad ends. And there is no one state of being that actually solves this thing. It's more so like a hodgepodge of different chemicals allows for this thing to exist. It seems to me that you necessarily have people such as isolationists within a state, and that allows the state to function because eventually you do need a little bit of isolationism. For example, during before World War I think a little bit more isolationism in the United States would have been a good thing. The avoiding of sending Americans to go die in Europe in World War One. It didn't. It was quite a peculiar thing to get involved with for the United States, and we're not speaking of World War II here. This is the one that no one really thinks about anymore, at least not in the United States.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's an example of how people that are extremely isolationists could actually do some very much so good for their country. And the same thing could be said for, let's say, like Russia, like a form of like political isolationism, or at least like non-chauvinism, could have done some very much so good for the entire world. Could have avoided an entire more than over a decade now of fiasco between Russia and Ukraine, and also Russia and many other countries. I think just like that, this lizard brain sentiment, I don't necessarily have that full like isolationist sentiment in mind all the time, but I do certainly see its validity and its utility in space. And I mean to say all of this to say that everyone is working according to their own ism, and you won't actually be able to isolate an owing, not one that is forever useful. You could ask Trevor what he thinks he should owe others, but I don't know if that's necessarily useful. Really, not to a very firm ongoing conversation about like abstract concepts such as use. So if you were asking like, hey Trevor, what do you think as a person? I'm afraid I just completely like just fucked the argument and like completely didn't answer it at all. But if you're asking me like, what is what does it mean to owe something to one's neighbors? That's the way I would encounter it. And like can you owe something to your what is it to owe something to your neighbors? I would say, well, everyone has extreme variance, and that is necessarily what the state of affairs is. And
I
I
just
can't solidify and find one single tune that everyone should attenuate towards.
yeah. So I just think in general, it's easier not to know your neighbors. Um, listener, hear me well. Um, you know, wherever you land, uh, I just feel like you should know your neighbors' names. I mean, and I'm talking about your physical neighbors now, like your direct neighbors. And there was a time where most people did, and that's gone. Um, if I asked 100 people at random in this small town, do you know your neighbors' names? I would be very interested to see the results, and I don't think it's many. I do not. Accounting for age and things like that, of course, I definitely think that younger people do not know their neighbors' names. Um, so, is it that we owe each other less, or is it easier not to know? Is it easier not to know such that you do not owe them anything?
Yes.
Exactly. That's
I
really what I'm trying
understand
to
now.
get at here.
I see.
And we say this all the time, or at least I do. I think that we ought to take care of each other because we are not that far away from our tribal ancestors when we were little more than a congress of hyper evolved apes. And just because we've insulated ourselves with all this technology and housing and all this sophisticated shelter and all these good things, I completely agree with what Trevor's saying there. I think that in any good Congress of humans, you would necessarily have people who are of the isolationist mind. We do not need to associate with that other tribe over there. They are the other, you know. And then we would have our adventure seekers, where it was like, no, we need to do everything we can to connect to that tribe. It's a difficult question. And so, like, we should move on to the others for certain, but maybe tie them in together. Which one should we talk about next? Do we owe each other respect or love? What do we think?
I think we should do respect next, but I do want to say that I think a big, and this may tie in with respect and love as well, and it more than likely does in some way that I just am not aware of right now, but I think a lot of what causes the issue of, probably the same reason I don't know my own neighbors' names. I've probably heard them before. I couldn't tell you what they are. I don't know what these people do for a living. I don't, I couldn't tell you who the people across the
It's
street
so
are.
easy not to know anything about them.
And I'll tell you what one of the number one contributing factors is to that, and listeners may not know. I'm sure as soon as I show you guys, you will be like, well, of course, this right here.
Mm-hmm.
This right here and many things like it. The thing that we are using right now to record this podcast is another contributing factor. There have been so many books and so many things written about how technology, while it seems to work to connect us, in fact really just keeps us isolated. And instead of communicating, like, to my neighbor, for example, now I'm only really communicating with people through a screen. That's a whole nother episode, but I wanted to make sure to include that in this episode as for,
Certainly.
this is definitely a factor of distancing between people.
We really should discuss that as a whole topic on its own.
Right.
For
It's just like
certain.
I posted in the Discord, the Gary Paulson to Ted Kaczynski pipeline.
Oh.
You know.
You can't keep quoting things that the audience can't see. It hurts.
They can look that up. That's
They can look
easily
that up. Go
discoverable.
check out our Discord. Go
If
check out
Tanner
this
was
meme.
here, he would be able to vouch for
Yes, he would.
it.
Yes, he would.
But that being
As we
said,
as we transition, I will tell the listener, we want to know what support, that's not love and respect, do you think you owe your neighbor, maybe even your family members. All right. So let's talk about respect. I want to share my feelings on this first.
Hmm.
This particular time. So I mean, I'm on Reddit all the time, right? And my Reddit feed is like just polluted. I mean, just devastated with all of this content, right? Where it's really, really easy to see how much people, especially, and of course we're talking about more or less just this country, in the U.S., the geography in which we live, that respect is simply not at a premium. You know, when's the last time you got cut off in traffic? You know what I mean? I mean,
no.
that that's that's kind of what we're talking about. But more to the point, I'm also talking about these people out here that seem to have no boundaries whatsoever. I mean, just the other day, I was helping with graduation. There was a big graduation ceremony for Neville, and my job was to ask people, where are you going, and get them where they needed to go. And we had a bunch of cops there. um you know uh they could not fuck around and find out like they did last year, is the point. um I could share a story about last year, but I'm not going to. A very disrespectful scenario. But what happened? People coming in by the dozens. They see these cops as soon as they come in, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, we better be on our best behavior." And so they were. Now, here's the thing: on no less than, give or take, 20 occasions, uh, it would be uh, someone in their middle ages or older. Let's just put it that way. Coming in, doing this right here, and I'm over there going, "Do you know where you're going? Do you know where you're going? Do you know where you're going?" I mean, like, and they're purposefully ignoring me. They don't want to talk to me, but I'm making it very clear that you don't know where you're going, and we need to figure that out. You can't just stand here. You know what I mean? Um, I was escorting, the people who are supposed to be in like specific chairs and stuff like that.
Oh, I see.
And it, like I said, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about. It's just easier. It's so much easier just to kind of, pretend as though people aren't there.
You know, there's three words that really sum that up, that really tie in beautifully with the conversation. You want to know what those three words are? Ignorance is bliss.
Okay.
When it comes to all this, just talking about neighbors, it's easier not to know your neighbors, because once you do, then you know their struggles, you know their needs, what they're going through day to day. You may start to feel obligations. If I don't know you, can I say I'm obligated to help you? Maybe that question's up in the air, but at least I don't have to answer it if I don't, if I don't want to. It's just like if you go to the supermarket and by one of the doors there's like the Salvation Army or the whoever, or input your whatever
XYZ.
donation thing, for lack of including baggage here. You might choose to go through the other door just so you can pretend like they're not there, so you don't have to have that awkward moment of just pretending like you don't see them, so that you don't have to, give $5 to the person dressed as Santa Claus.
See, and like, I want to share something funny about myself. I'm not like that at all. I will literally, be going by these people and they're bugging me, and I say, "No, thank you." I look them dead in the eye. No, thank you. Especially if
Right.
it's like, and I swore to myself that I would kind of lay off the religion talk this episode, but I can't help it.
There's
Like,
no way. There's no way.
yeah,
I don't know what
uh,
you expected of yourself, but
yeah,
your
like all
expectations
of
were.
these like mega religious people out here, claiming to do charity and so on, loitering in front of a store or whatever. I mean, who cares? But like they're the most persistent,
Hmm.
and I look them dead in the eye and I say no, thank you. And if they say another word, I say leave me alone. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about respect here. I respect them. I feel like I respect them enough to tell them, the honest opinion. I'm here to do something that does not concern you.
Mhm.
At least I'm not ignoring you. You know what I mean?
Right.
I feel like, I don't know. What are y'all thoughts? What are y'all's thoughts on that? Which is more
Uh,
rude?
oh.
Telling people no
Hmm.
thank you, or the apathetic just walk by them. You know what I mean?
Well,
Or excuse me, the
yes.
apathetic walk by them.
Ah, well, I'd like to say one thing. If we were to talk about support or love, we could put a lot of work into it and find a lot of interesting things. But talking about respect, RESPECT,
Hmm.
that sort of shit. If you're gonna get into that, I'm afraid it's harder to touch on because it's as a word it could mean a lot more things,
It's
and
loaded.
it's loaded, and it's loaded in different ways given different circumstances, which makes it very difficult to have a substantive conversation about it. Sometimes it's as simple as, well, you didn't respect me because you didn't give me what I want. That's disrespectful. You just disrespected me.
Yeah, that's a
I have
toddler
this
thing,
form right
and
here
this country's full of it.
and you didn't sign it. That's disrespectful. You should have manners. How dare you? That kind of thing. Or you could have something like what you just said. Like, I just want you to take me seriously. You know, like just the other day, I remember I had a person I know in research who was like getting worried for this big presentation she was going to give, and I was like, "Well, this is great, this presentation, because you're going to be taken very seriously. Like this, you're going to be taken seriously. Like finally, someone will look at what you've done. No pandering, nothing like that. Just give you the straight facts as to how they think you should go with it. These people that are perfectly specialized in your field. Very useful. That's very respectful in that sense. What do I mean by all this? I mean to say that this is I have a lot of difficulty having a conversation about respect because it quite literally means different things to different people. It's just riveted into many different narratives all at the same time. I don't think one can have a substantive conversation about something like respect. I could offer like anecdotal stories, if I said that right, of myself and like the way I engage with those sort of things. But all I could say is I'm just riveted and I'm just following my own narrative, and I'm just trying to. I can't help it suffer a little when I don't treat people the way that I would like to be treated. Like I quite literally I'm not trying to be special here. I think a lot of people have this emotion. I think most people have this emotion where you well up a certain amount of suffering within yourself when you do something that is counter to that golden rule. It quite literally irks me, and I do think that when I think of respect, I often think of that sentiment of the golden rule, just treating people the way you want to be treated. But
Let,
that is
let me,
itself
yeah.
another narrative. It's a lattice work of many different people encountering reality. Some people it's don't if you don't treat me the way I want to be treated. Some people it's see me, and other people it's just you know. There's so many things. So many things.
Let me pose a question that certainly has a lot to do with what we're talking about.
Hmm.
To harness the meaning, to at least get my foot in the door, right? Because this is another one of these topics that I feel like I've wanted to talk about for a long time, but maybe was not well equipped with the language to do so. So, do you feel, and I want to hear from Bray on this one for sure. Do you feel like you're more likely to defend yourself against an injustice, or to step in to correct an injustice against someone else? As an example, I'll talk about that story I just swore I wouldn't. Um, in last year's graduation ceremony, it was it was at it was at the stadium. For those of us listening, just imagine an average high school stadium. Imagine it wherever you went, anything like that. And teachers are there, unpaid, I might add, to keep order among all the adults or the parents that we've never seen, because they refuse to have anything to do with their child's education. And then uh, I'm sitting there, right? And I've dealt with disrespect all night, and I don't take anything personally, or at least I try not to. It's very hard for me to take anything personally, from especially strangers. Like I'll be going down the road, getting mad at other drivers, if there's someone else in the car with me, and then I'll look over to them, after being all hyperbolic, and I'll just smile and laugh. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
it's not even a big deal.
Huh.
But so I've been dealing with disrespect all night. People telling me things like, uh, uh, where do we go? Well, can't I just get in without a ticket? No, just no. Is there anything you can do for me? No, no. I said, you get what I'm saying? Like, that's, it's just very matter of fact with me.
Hmm.
But I look over and I see another teacher, and they are having a very tough time. There are three people who are way above their weight class, just like all around this teacher, and they're making a scene. And it was my first and only instinct to interject myself in between these people, right?
Hmm.
I am so like even eager to like um correct disrespect for from one person to another, from one party to another, but not necessarily for myself. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. No, I can see that.
So
Oh,
I mean, like, which is more likely? Like I said, I want to hear from Bray on this one. Do you think
please.
you'd defend yourself against an injustice or disrespect, or more likely defend another?
So personally for me, like I am probably more willing to just take punches, so to speak, when it comes to myself, because I know that I can. If there was an injustice done to me, sometimes more often than not, I'm just going to let it go, or I'm going to be like, well, that's life. That's life.
It's what the people
That's what
say.
plays in my head
You know,
every time.
Yeah, yeah.
However, when it happens to somebody else, I don't know why, but I'm incredibly motivated to do something. Just the other day, I heard over the phone, like just messaging with a friend of mine who has a transgender sibling, and both of these people were raised by Protestant Pentecostals. Um, and so
nuts.
the
That's what you
relationship
meant to
has
say.
been
You mispronounced nuts.
All right. All right.
the relationship has been rocky at best.
Yeah.
uh,
By the way, dear listener, I was raised Pentecostal. They're nuts. Okay.
uh, and this friend of mine was just telling me about how their sibling was, being berated, for the umpteenth time by the parents, and that it's just causing so much chaos. And this friend of mine just needed to get out of the house because they can't take it anymore. It's just such a stressful situation. And I straight up told this friend of mine, I was like, I'm ready to throw hands right now with your parents. I've never even met them. Like, I just cannot tolerate. And you guys know me. Every time back on campus when the Jesus
Hmm.
freak people were out, I was like, where are they at? I'm on my way. Like
You
I'm
and me
ready
would
to
go
go.
find them. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. And
others.
I mean, most of the time, what we encountered was just people who were fairly lax, and either we're just you're chill. I'm just here
And
because
we would have a good
whatever, or
conversation with them.
right. Unfortunately, the one time that I did get around to the, God hates all the gay people and you're all going to hell, people showed up. They were on their way out by the time I got there. Anyways, all that aside, rope it back in because there's something to be said about respect here that I want to plug, and that there's just while we're in the religious sphere, there's a saying, people will say all the time, why can't you just let people believe what they want to believe? And I've probably said on the podcast before that, what people believe inform their actions. So I am kind of obligated to care as it pertains to my well-being and other people, what you believe, because you're going to do shit based on what you believe. And so I tell people all the time, like, I respect you as a human being in as much as I should grant you some baseline of respect, having not known you.
Or autonomy.
Right. Even just call it autonomy. Like, I respect you as a human being because you share the same instinctual needs that I do. Like, if you are hungry, I know what it is to be hungry. I don't respect your beliefs. Your beliefs are batshit crazy. Like, they will get no respect from me. So I will absolutely criticize those to the moon and back. And if you take personal offense to your person, that is on you.
So yes, I don't mean to interrupt.
No,
but
that was pretty much what I wanted to say about
I
respect
wanted
in
to get to
regard
this
to
that
people's
way.
beliefs.
Well, just like this, I can offer a contrary over the definition of respect.
Of course I can.
Is that directly coalesces with what you're saying, Bray. Like this. I would say respect. The way that I usually encounter the word respect is, like I said earlier, being taken seriously. If I respect you and you come to me and give me an opinion that I don't believe is true, then I would tell you, hey,
Exactly.
that sounds ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Where did you get the evidence for that? Why do you believe that? That sort of thing. Anything where I would like cater to your opinion that I think is wrong, or anything like that, is I think it's itself a movement away from respect. It's me pandering to you for some reason. It's a lack of respect, both for one's own opinions and the other. And just like that, I think it's really quite difficult to have a conversation about respect because it really truly does mean anything. It's quite the blanket thing. And I don't think
like I said, it's a
I'll
loaded
very
term
easily
like
find
honor.
yes, and you will find difficulty tying it down to anything substantive in this sense. You won't be able to. And I think that's where we are now. I don't think you can really say anything about respect, really. But if you want to talk about that one thing that was brought up by Stephen at the right before about like intersecting with others and helping others, I do think that happens. I do think it happens quite easily, where you would intercede upon someone else's affairs instead of when in a similar circumstance where it's occurring to you, you may not. I think that's true. Anyway, yeah.
I really like that you said that.
Where does it come from?
Where does
it's
that
because
come
you're
from?
really
Like our eagerness to defend
yes,
the other, at least someone close to us, but maybe even the stranger. For example, like, if I walked in to a restaurant, right, and the next table over, there sat some people being extremely hostile to their waiter for no reason. And let's say I had the same waiter and they were being just gorgeous, you know what I mean? Just like perfect and whatever. I would say something. And in this stage of life that I'm in right now, I know that I would. You know what I mean? Like, I cannot stand to see it.
Right. So to that, I would say, first things first. Let me just state it out. The assertion. When you have like an event happening between that's happening to you or happening vicariously to someone else, like you see it happening to someone else, you're more likely to engage upon the interlocutor, that other person, instead of yourself. So to that, I would say, Stephen, or just listener, you're incredibly complicated. You're full of these overarching narratives and ideas, and constantly second guessing yourself this way and that, and also solidifying your base this way and that. You never quite solidify what you are, and you have that fluidity to you. So you're not. Whenever someone treats you in a heinous manner from time to time, it can be quite easy for you to encounter that in terms that would seem to be not very gratifying. Like someone treats you like shit, and like you think in your thoughts, you think, well, maybe I'm a piece of shit. That sort of thought, or maybe many other opinions. Here's the difference: if you see someone else, like that waiter, for example, it's a perfect example. That person at that moment isn't this myriad of many different beings all at once. Not in that instant. He is an archetype. You see him as a waiter,
Yes.
and that's it. He's an extreme simplification, and also a disengagement. In the same way that
Oh,
you'll fly
no.
around Grand Theft Auto and crash your car into like 10 things, your entire sense of self isn't incumbent on this one situation, on this one encounter. And you could very easily see yourself walking up to this other group of people and saying, "Hey, y'all are being total pricks," something like that, or maybe just leave this waiter a large tip and say, "I'm sorry for those assholes over there," or whatever it is. It's very easily to live vicariously through another because there's that first level of disengagement, but also just the fact that you don't see maybe at home this waiter's a shitty person to his wife or boyfriend or whatever else. Like he's just a shitty guy in this particular circumstance. But at the exact same time, he also feverishly misses his mother, and he cries sometimes when no one's looking. Like he's extremely complicated, this guy, and it's really difficult
I love
to.
how you put that, though. In that moment,
Yes,
I see,
simplification.
the power dynamic at play, and
Hmm.
that's all I see.
Yes, and you
But
are.
that's good
And
enough.
Jean-Paul
Yes.
Sartre has entered the chat over here.
Yeah. You are seen by the other. That's a fucker. All right. You are seen by the other as this thing, and that kind of puts you into that place, into that time. If you want to look at it like that, like the way that Bray just brought it in. Like I kind of remember this pretty well. I used to work at an arcade. I won't tell you where, but I worked at a really big arcade that had like a standing bar on it on the side. So like both the kids could go play arcade games, and then the parents could get trashed and then go play arcade games. So that's what this place was, and I worked
Neat.
in that arcade. It was a life, and I worked there for like high school, and it was strange when you first do something like that for the first time in your life. Retail workers, anyone who's listening will sympathize with this, where you are seen by the other for the first time, not as a person, not as this or that,
But an
but
object.
as an object, a part of the room, just the thing in the room
And
that
that is the
serves a purpose,
wrongest way.
and
You've
that's
hit
all that
upon
you are.
you've hit upon the exact idea that I ultimately wanted to get to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really think that we owe it to each other
Mm-hmm.
not to treat each other as objects.
But
For
that's yes.
for example, I don't know where this came from, but like there was a very big uptick in my students calling each other NPCs this year,
Yeah, yeah,
and I got
yeah. I know.
so mad at them each
There
and
are no,
every
no,
time.
there are
Like,
no
now of course
NPCs.
I wasn't
Yeah.
really mad, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
would go to them, feign anger at the least, and tell them like, you can't do this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. I can't help but remember that like one meme of like 10 different people sitting in a bus car, and each one of them has the same imagination line going to the same thing. Like I am the one person that's actually alive in this bus car. No one
Yes, that
else knows what
solipsism
it's
needs to be
like.
stamped out.
It's
I'm
like
telling you.
I no one knows but me that I am the Messiah.
Oh,
And that happens in
no.
all 10 different people in the boxcar. I would say um it's complicated. It's really complicated because this is what it is. This is what it is. If you
I
want to
disagree.
engage with
I
reality,
really don't
no,
think it's that complicated.
I think it is, and this is the reason. This is the reason. When you engage with reality, you have to engage it according to some terms. That is to say, that you have to put walls and barriers around in order to actually live. And when I create walls and barriers, I have to, if I want to, let's say, okay, I want to go to the grocery store, make some orders and stuff, that
Hmm.
sort of thing. Well, in that moment, all those people that work there, it's really quite difficult to engage with someone as that myriad state of being every single time in every single place. I'm not saying that, okay, therefore you shouldn't do it. I'm only saying that that's quite literally the way that the game is set, you know?
Okay,
Like,
okay.
I have to look at you as
Maybe I
as
need
a
to walk
rook
back.
or a bishop. You
Maybe I
say?
need to walk back. So
Please.
maybe it is complicated, but it's not hard. It's not hard to do.
Okay, so what exactly? When
Does
we talk
hard
about like
mean?
no. I mean, like when you say like when I do successfully treat you as a person, in that sense, like a
Yeah.
truly individual, not the othering that we just spoke of, like when I worked at that arcade, like that. what exactly does that look like, and what exactly is that at that moment? Because I think that's the disparate connection here. Because if we can square that circle, I think we can perhaps agree.
Yeah, so I mean, like, of course, it's complicated to talk about it, literally any social interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are a very like, I was talking to this with a roommate the other day, and she and I were talking about elephants and whales and orcas and dolphins and chimps and all of these organisms on this earth that are um, intelligent, that are not us.
Mm.
And I think we can more or less agree that they're not as intelligent as us, right? But I just posed this small question. I was like, what if they kind of are like as hardline intelligent as us, but their sense of intention is not as evolved as ours. Evolved as in, like, it's not as high powered
Right.
as our own, right? We can detect each other's intentions by
Mm.
so many metrics, better perhaps than other organisms. And that's not to say, by the way, that we're the best at it. We just happen to be very intelligent and be able to sense each other's intentions at the same time. So, um, I don't know. Like, it's of course it's complicated, and I get where you're coming from on that. But if we kind of pull a Trevor here and say, okay,
Ah.
it's this complicated, right?
Mm.
And then treating each other with respect is this complicated. Well, why don't we just accept the that we're just talking about the difference here, right? What if we accept that it's just not that hard to take that next step and treat each other well? Like,
Mm.
if I go to Walmart, the hell on earth Walmart, okay?
Mm.
Literally Boomerville, USA Walmart, okay?
Mm.
Uh, and then, and what I'm trying to say is, even if I see a boomer and could probably guess what they're thinking about, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter, right? Um, what if I treated them with at least human dignity? Does that make sense? I just don't think that's very hard. And so many people find it impossible, you know?
So, let's try to pin it. So when you say treat them with human dignity at that moment, do you mean something like, be really simple here, golden rule, just treat them how you would want to be treated, simple as that? Or what exactly? We can list some examples, such as like being shitty to someone for no reason or that sort of thing. But if we could pin the really solid definition as to what being treated with dignity is, I think we might find some agreement. But at the moment, it's very
Yeah.
it's hard for me to exactly
Well,
understand.
let's talk about it a little bit. And
Hmm.
I wanted to get to this as well. Um, One easy one I can think of with human dignity is personal space. Okay. Now,
Hmm.
that's a very cultural thing. I realize that in other cultures on this earth, people don't have very much personal space and they don't really seem to mind, right? But at the bare most minimum, uh, personal space to me means that, like, if you're not comfortable with a situation, you can leave. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I see. Okay.
Sorry, there was this really good meme like that that was like, "Are you uncomfortable in any situation? Remember, you can literally just leave."
Just
And it was
leave.
like listing off all of these different situations, like grocery store, little shop on the corner, like awkward social situation. Just leave. You can, you are allowed to leave.
Well, like, I have another graduation ceremony story to tell. Of course, I was talking with, um, someone trying to get in,
hmm.
and when I shit you not, they got this close to my nose, and
What?
I didn't budge. I mean, like, they were not being hostile. They just got that close to me, you know, and I don't know. I just stood there and let them do it. You know what I mean? And it was them who got awkward and took the step back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like they ran into me. They saw me, very far away, coming up, and walked all the way to me to do that. and then they took the awkward step back. It's like, okay,
It's like
I
when you
literally just saw you realize that what you did was wrong.
Yeah.
So why did you do
That
it?
was the other seeing you. That was the
it's
other
like when you
seeing
run
you.
everywhere in an RPG, you gotta turn in a quest.
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, and then the oblivion thing comes up, and you're like, oh my god. But
Well,
maybe
yes.
we can agree on that, right? You
Well,
have autonomy in your body, right? You can't be detained by just some rando at Walmart, okay?
you most
You have
most
committed
certainly
crimes against Skyrim.
Yeah.
pay the
For the
fee or
emperor.
serve your
Jesus
sentence.
wept.
All right,
I mean,
so I mean, to that I'm not gonna lie, I have to say no. I don't think like I think you put the the issue right at the front before you opened up. That being that there are many other cultures with very different perceptions of sense of space. And I think you provided a very cool arm of what respect means. Like you provided a perspective, a particular way of looking at this giant ornate sculpture, and shown, well, this is one of its many visages. There's many ways of seeing it. But what I think I've opened up here is a sort of Steveism, or like the way that Steve encounters what respect means. And I think that sort of reveals the overarching issue with respect, the idea of respect. Because other people don't have that one arm, that one perspective. They don't share that aspect of the narrative, and just like that, the whole thing becomes fuzzy again. It's all just fuzz all over again, because we talk about this thing like being seen by the other,
yeah, but
and like
so
that whole
that
thing.
is
But
why I narrowed it down. I narrowed it down specifically to you can leave. In other words, like some rando cannot, under any circumstances, come into Trevor's room and
Mhm.
say, "Hey, bud, you can't leave." You know, I'm just gonna put my arms around you, and that's that. You can't leave. Like there's no culture on this earth that would say, that's just fine. You know what I mean?
I'm so sorry. I was just reminded of the oh, this is a terrible time to bring this up, but the joke that Dave Chappelle made about Louis C.K. and the whole.
I don't know that one.
oh
Do you guys know? Okay,
yeah.
so a few years ago, when all of like the people were coming about the sexual assault,
The Me Too movement.
yeah, all of
Mhm.
those stories were coming out. People came out against Louis C.K. because apparently he would like I
No,
guess either on the phone or
in
in
person a
person,
few times.
he
Yeah.
would like masturbate into a plant.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But apparently, like, and Dave Chappelle's whole point was like, it's like, well, it's not like he was like holding these people down and forcing them to like watch, like just get up and leave, like go,
Just leave, huh?
I just,
I mean, like, was this in
but
a private space?
Um,
I mean, I guess it could have been in like an office or something, but like you just fucking,
the whole story is pretty.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Can't do it anymore, Louis. Sorry, we're me out. I can't.
Yeah, it's a pretty heinous story.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, not heinous, but it's a weird story that
It's
we could get into.
bodacious.
Yes.
Bodacious, sure. Yeah, I like that. But yeah, so the reason why I brought that thing up earlier is like my initial issue with the whole idea. I perfectly agree that me speaking, I like that notion. I think it's very useful, and I think when engaging with something like respect, I do think that's a useful arm of it and way of encountering it. But that's just me. We're talking about me here.
No, Trevor, it's not. We're talking about kidnapping. Like no culture on Earth is okay with kidnapping.
Uh,
What I mean to say, of course, is like no,
no civilized
no civilized people are
society.
okay with kidnapping.
All right. Well, you can.
And
all right.
what I mean to
All
say
right.
is I don't have to over explain that. I
Right.
mean, you straight up have autonomy of your body,
Yes.
and no one can take that away from you without doing a crime. In other words,
Mhm.
either you had to do a crime, or a crime is being done to you for you to
Right.
lose it. That makes
Mhm.
sense?
Certainly.
Let's talk about love real quick, and just on the last on a bit of something on respect that I think should go in here at the end for me,
Mm-hmm.
at the butt end. As somebody who has worked in the fine dining industry for over 10 years, to keep it brief, I have grown to a point where now if somebody does disrespect me at a table, like I have accumulated so many years of experience
Of
that I
cursed
am just at
energy.
this point like probably liable to snap. Like
Oh,
I like the guise of waiter, or whatever you want to call it, is very thinly veiled over me at this point, just because you get so accustomed to just the usual BS on a regular basis that you're just like, at this point, like, people just
Yeah.
need to get educated.
I love Gordon Ramsay to
Uh,
death. You know what I mean? And whatchamacallit? I've seen him on more than one occasion go up to people who are rude to like waiters that he employs, and he's just like, "Get out,"
yeah,
you know. And they're like, "Well, how very dare you?" And he's like, "I do not care,
yeah,
not even a little bit. You need to get out." You know what I mean?
yeah.
But we should talk um about
Let's
love,
talk about
and
love.
and this will be short.
love is easier. Love is much
Yeah,
easier, I think.
this will be
Yes.
short. So, initial thoughts. Do we owe each other love? No, probably not. Is that all?
Well, no, 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 no,
Like
no,
a
no.
standoff with Trevor.
I mean,
No,
like, you know.
your words. I swear to God, your word cut like halfway through the sentence. I didn't catch like the middle of it. You could say it one more time. Maybe it'll.
Yeah. Do we owe each other love? No, probably not.
Do we other?
Probably not might be my answer too, because I feel like love is a step above what is. That's
And look,
hard.
all three of these terms, I've brought up: support, respect, love. They are they have an ambiguity
Ambiguous.
about
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
that is kind of on purpose, right? In other words, it's an open-ended question, right?
Mhm.
Is
I
it
can't.
possible to have
Yes.
love for
Your enemy.
the concept of a community, but refrain from handing it out on an individual basis? Like, it would feel weird for me to say I love the human race or the human species, or I love
How
the
could you not be
overall
part of it?
concept of the United States society, like made up of these people. Like, I love these people, but then it's literally a paradox. It's, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like I say this to the group, but then you start pulling down individuals, and I say nope, 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 nope. Like I'm gonna have to Google what that is after
So.
this, but
So when I say okay, so going back to it, like, do we owe each other love? So to that question, I immediately circle my brain, or my mind, around many different narratives where I would like see that question posed. Like, within a political system, no, no, not within a political system. That doesn't make sense. Not to me. I disagree with that. And then I go, okay, well, is it useful within like this framework or that framework or this frame? I just go through. You go through various frameworks, and that's the difficulty here, because it's hard to just throw that in without the framework that underlies it, some sort of presupposition. Because if you wanted to, we could construct for ourselves here and now a toy set situation before us, where the answer to what do we owe each other love would be yes. I think you could assert a certain toy situation, such as that, such as within like a social framework of a family, let's say of like four
yeah,
or five
that's
people
yeah,
that share a house
exactly.
together. If the question was, insofar as you wanted to be happy and joyous within this household, uh, would you therefore require love? Would you love each other in order to reach that desired endpoint? And you could very well say it is yes, and you could level into what exactly you mean by those individual pieces that line up to it. And just like that, you have an answer to your question. The answer is yes. But then also, it was also no. And then it was no that time too. And it was also no that other time. Well, you see, it's a bit like on a chessboard of many different pieces. Like this is like the middle game of a chessboard, where there are many different pieces all across. Half the pieces are gone. The rook is over here. The knight is over there. The bishop's over there. Any listeners that don't know how to play chess, I am very sorry. This will be a little funky of a analogy for you, but what
Any
we
game
have
will
here.
do.
So any game will do. Let's just say there is a set of the pieces aligned in this way, where it makes perfect sense to move the knight from this point to that point to get to the end goal of the king being taken. Let's say, like it makes perfect sense to do it at that moment, but that exact move would make perfectly no sense at all. In fact, it would be quite foolish to do. In fact, it's completely antithetical to the entire point of the mission at that moment to do it in a different set of affairs, in a different middle game, or a different situation.
Right.
And
Right.
what I'm trying to say is the presupposition, that's what I'm saying. The presupposition, the chessboard itself, and the way that all the other pieces are aligned are the most, thumbs up. I don't know how to say, you know what? I can do all sorts of weird things with it too. I don't know. Like, see, there you go. Fireworks. I have absolutely no idea how to turn that off. That literally, it's on my Zoom. It's on all my shit. I don't know what it is. I think this does something else too. Let's see. Yep. Balloons. Yeah. So I mean to say all this because it's quite literally the chessboard. It's quite literally the presuppositions. I cannot find a perfect answer to the question because the question itself relies upon so much. It relies upon so much, and I don't know a perfect solution to it because it's not quite the right way to encounter it.
I have an answer for our dear listener, right? I'll try to make this as wholesome as possible. Um, you owe no love to no one, and I
Mm.
mean no one. Um, people straight up have to earn that. Okay.
I am a rock.
As
I
someone
am it.
as
Sorry.
someone who has like had to cut ties with not just a little of their family, but most of it, I can promise you that they do not deserve anything from me, least of which, least of all, love. Okay, so like I say, you can kind of, you know, uh, guide your way through that, or like feel your way through that, so to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to understand that there's a kind of boundary there that has to be honored, and it was not honored in my childhood. And that is like this idea that there's this unconditional love among family members. No, there are conditions. You know, first of which is both parties have to be alive, right? I mean, um, if if I'm dead, I'm not loving anyone, for example. But regardless, if you're mistreated in any way, no, you do not owe those people anything, least of all love. Ray,
Yep.
weigh in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, that's where I would have gone next, would have been to the family situation, because I think in the back of our minds we think, well, if I owe love to anybody, just even unconditionally, it's like you would think it would probably be my family. That's the closest bond I can have to another of my species,
Perhaps.
potentially, because of blood and DNA and upbringing and all of that. But I'm a great case in point. Maybe not the greatest example of, family is really just whoever you surround yourself with. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter who gave birth to you. The people whose DNA that I directly descend from, I have interacted with either absolutely not at all or at very bare minimum in my upbringing. Matter of fact, great example of why something like that just doesn't exist. I went about 20 something years. This is a little bit of a personal thing, but I don't really mind sharing. I went about 20 something years without even really knowing what my actual father looked like, um, much less like even having ever spoken to him, known of him, anything like that. I was raised in a great part by my great grandparents, and of course by this time, I believe my great grandfather had passed away already, so my father figure was pretty much out of the ballpark. Anyways, my father found me on Facebook and messaged me, uh, years ago now, but and basically like expressed interest in, I guess, getting to know me and all of this, and meeting me and wanting to be a part of my life. And I didn't respond. But I mean, for me personally, it was literally like, I don't even, I don't even know who you are, like
Yeah.
because quite literally, I don't like, I couldn't even probably have picked you out in a crowd until, you know, recently. So, and I never felt any, so I don't feel any sort of unconditional love for something like that. I feel like my father has been passed away for like a decade now almost. Um, so yeah, I mean, my person I call my mom is my one of my great aunts. And I happily call somebody who's only shares one parent with me, a brother. I'd call my uncle, who's a year younger than I am, my brother, if it made any sense. But yeah, these are just things that they're a lot like trust. We sort of grant love and trust and respect tentatively based on our experiences. um and we always have the right to revoke those things based on the circumstances.
And it's not
um
appropriate. It's not appropriate for any person to suggest that you do owe them. And
right.
I wish so badly that someone had told me that a long time ago.
Hmm.
It's a good
Well,
adage. Yes, it's a good adage to
there's
live by. Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of traditional, what's the word I'm looking for, S- uh, traditional societal structures, or family structures that revolve around the idea of just unwavering love, support, and respect for, I don't know, any authority, or some sort of, a male at the head of a household, or the guy standing up there yelling things at you every week, whatever. Um, but I think, at least I can speak of the fact that I don't really support those.
So one thing I wanted to say about both of your stories, I think what you've both just opened the door to, and let us, as both myself and the audience, come in and see, is this cathartic uh, um, ism, this thing that really balances your understanding of something is so foundational as a family. Very important, these things, and very fundamental, and very important that they're said aloud, that you might encounter them and see them. But I think of these things, these stories that we ourselves are and engage with every day, as themselves other sets of this set of pieces of this board. In the same way that I've set up a toy example of insert this for loving one another, and then yes, you this is now, as we introduce stories of where families do not do so, and families do not lead to the conclusion that one ought to have one for love for one another. I think that leaves that opens the door just to other just different setups of the board. We're looking at just different alignments of the pieces. We've just moved the pieces around a bit, but the same central tenet of the issue remains the same. That do we owe each other love is itself not a doesn't have everything it needs in order to be answered correctly. Like, you need a lot more information. You need a lot more of the presuppositions, more of the board pieces at play in order to actually give a substantive answer. Because it's not a yes or no question, because there are many different narratives that one lives within. And you could very well, I think if I were to sit here now and just spend the next 30 minutes just talking one-on-one with Stephen, for example, and I could fill the table, fill the chessboard with pieces in such and such a way that I could derive a yes out of the question. Do we owe each other love? I do think we could derive that answer, given enough time. If I could just scaffold for you an environment, a narrative, to which you could fit yourself in and derive that answer. I do think that's possible. And the reason why I bring that up is I think that this question requires much more of itself, requires much more scaffolding in order to have a substantive answer. Until you can like ground it in something like like you could say something like in a political atmosphere, um, within the state. Do you owe all other compatriots of yours, all other comrades within your state, love, compulsory love? And that you can derive a more substantive answer. But of just the blanket statement, do we owe each other love? I the narratives are just so myriad and so many pieces align. And the knight could really take the queen, or it could go this way or that way. It flows in so many different ways that you can't have a substantive answer.
Sure, but I stand by it, and
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
so we'll sign off. We'll sign off here. Uh, you know, because we respect your time. During you know,
And we love our own.
Yes.
Yeah, and we owe you the respect, love, and support of being our valued listener. We do want to know, by the way, we very desperately want to know. Once again, what support do we owe each other? What respect we owe each other? What love we owe each other, and so on. All right. So, last words, people.
Well, I think I pretty much had mine.
Sure.
I think I'll just let it fly from there. Let it coast into what Bray has to say.
I'll keep it short and simple. Perhaps we would all be better off, even if we didn't believe it, behaving anyways like we did owe some degree of support, love, and respect to other people. Like, maybe just try it. Just try for a week to act like you actually have a higher obligation and duty. Matter of fact, there are a lot of books about happiness that I've been trying to get back into reading. That was one of the philosophy classes that I took in the minor. And a consistent theme I've found, personally at least, is just doing good things for other people just because. So try it. Try for a week to just amplify your or create out of nothing a love, respect, and supportive behavior for other people for no reason at all other than just to do it, and you probably find a lot of good things to come from that.
Mm-hmm. I remember once one good way of encountering that in my experience would be when you go to a workplace, for example, and like somebody there, just somebody you just know casually that you work with, and they come in and you do the normal ask how their weekend was or something, and they just say, "Oh, it was great, nothing really," whatever it is. If you at that moment, instead of letting it become elevator talk, as it very often does, instead really listen to them and don't have your iPhone out or anything. Just sort of engage with them and take them very seriously at that moment and listen to what they have to say. You'd be surprised how much people open up and become humans. Go from this archetype that you have earlier of just this coworker that you both don't know and perhaps also don't want to know because perhaps you don't like them. And then suddenly you allow that person to flower into an actual person, become a person. And I think that is one aspect of what Bray just said there that can be very useful.
And it's so little to just allow yourself for just a few moments to bear the responsibility of just hearing somebody else.
It's not hard. Just
hearing somebody else.
It's really difficult because you can be like that sometimes, and then other times you forgot where the time went, and it's been 4 months, and you haven't done that in a while. It can be very difficult. I speak from experience.
Absolutely. It's easy, like we said. It's so much easier not to. But ultimately, it's not that hard. Well,
that's a great end.
the
I love that.
The way I'd like to kick off today, I'll sign us off. First off, we thank you again for joining us. Okay. And we always say, or at least I do, take care of each other, right? But tonight I would like to iterate that we should turn this question in a different way on your own. What do you owe yourself? What do you owe to yourself? You owe yourself respect to yourself. You owe yourself support. You're just one person. You have to be able to support yourself in the right ways. In other words, how can you be expected to do good things without the proper support, without the proper foundation, without the proper framework or scaffolding, as Trevor might say? And you owe yourself love. We can talk about the science. We can talk about how you are a very unlikely organism. You are one among literally countless organisms that could have been, one of countless people who could have been. You are a person, but only one. So you must learn how to do these things for yourself before you can even attempt to do it for others or toward others. So, like Bray said, just try it. Just step back. Realize that you are not the main character. Realize that you are one part in a very big organism, and you are not able to separate yourself away from other people. Not ultimately. Someone has to bury you, eventually. So just think about it, then think hard, and I thank you. Very good.
All right. Peace out.